mean, that's the question of our time, right? When there is so much misinformation out there, which was co-opted as this idea of fake news, invented by the biggest distributor of fake news, I think, over the last 4 years, which was the 45th president of the United States. Obviously not on an international level, but definitely on a national level here in the US. And so it was pretty interesting that, the most used term to describe this problem was coined by someone who is who exploited that problem the most for personal gain. And so we are in a state right now where people don't trust the media, people don't trust government, and people don't trust each other, which to me that's the worst part. That to me is the part that, obviously in a global pandemic where we're in touch with different people, even more in the sense, I can call up my friends and I can go down my newsfeed and be in this bubble, whether there's a pandemic or not. But with real life going on in a non-pandemic kind of world, I would be bumping into people that might not agree with me on things. I'd be talking to someone at the grocery store, right, at the coffee shop. I'd go to conferences. I'd be, there's some level of travel, even if it's not international, that's involved, where there's just like ideas and people bumping into each other. And right now, what we have is really, on both sides, a very, very big mistrust of the other side. I think in a US context, there's definitely one side doing more misinformation than the other. I think, again, there are people who are in power on the right, particularly who are weaponizing misinformation, who are weaponizing conspiracy theories. And to me, it's a policy issue. It's a structural issue that we need our governments and we need politicians and we need, a lot of great thinkers to be working on, but we also need to do it on an individual level. And we need to be trying to understand why now, right? What is going on with people on an individual level, systematically, that is making them buy into conspiracy theories, buy into these communities of misinformation, because that's what we tend to forget, even when we talk about white supremacy, when we talk about men's rights activists, these groups online that I talk a lot about in the book, and I think is one of the greatest threats to democracy all over the world, by the way. That it's easy to just kind of dismiss those people as, you name it, stupid, mentally ill, they don't know better, they're racist, they're sexist, right? They're deplorables. It's really easy to sort of, just sort of put them all in the same basket and think that, and expect that from them, as opposed to ask, what is it that they're seeking in these communities, and what is it that they need that they're not getting? And how can we as a society be better about trying to understand what those needs are and meeting those needs? And often in those conversations, it feels like a mental health conversation. What do you need? What's going on? It's also an economic justice conversation, right? What do you need? What's going on? Well, I lost my job. Well, I'm working 3 jobs because the minimum wage in the United States has remained the same over the last 30 years. And even Democrats, aren't sure if $15 an hour, living wage is something that they want to do because that's seen as a radical thing. So, it's structural, individual, and then comes back to structural. It's really this, we need a holistic approach to this problem. We need sort of everyone on deck, from mental health experts, from psychologists, but those people need resources. So then, there's that structural issue too. It needs to be a priority for our policymakers as well, to really address this issue, I think in a more empathetic and holistic kind of way.
Hey, America, you voted out Trump. Congrats. But since he hasn't really acknowledged it yet, we decided to help him out.
Yeah, I mean, that's something I think a lot about. Adam Grant just came out with a book about, how to change people's minds. And he says, instead of asking why, ask how. So instead of saying, why do you believe, that, I don't know, undocumented people are taking your job? Say, how are undocumented people taking your job? And, sort of have them do that exercise of explaining how that perspective, just the argument, right? I don't know how I love Adam, and again, I highly respect his work. I tend to actually believe the opposite, where instead of focusing on, how the facts, the data, right, and having an argument about numbers, like, to me, asking why is that important to you? Why why do you feel like undocumented people are a threat to you? Like, what, sort of getting to the core of that, and fill in the blank with, transgender people having rights and, poor people being able to live, right? Minimum wage is a really good example, right? Sort of, why is this an important issue to you? Why do you feel so passionate about this? What is it that, and trying to get to basically, which is how every human actually makes decisions, which is based on our emotions. We have 4,000 words. Our brains can create so many thoughts, right? Literally, I saw this stat the other day. 4,000, your brain is able to process 4,000 words a minute. Yeah, I wrote it down right there so I would know it. It's 4,000 words. That means the equivalent of writing 2 books a day. So there are thoughts going through your mind, right? And that's how we think that we make decisions, right? Well, I thought I'm like journalism, so I'm going to go into journalism, so that's why I'm a journalist. Or you thought, I have this great idea for this great organization, so I'm going to start it. But what probably happened is that you felt things, right? You saw inequality and you were like, that doesn't feel right. Like, you probably felt it in your body. It was an emotion. It was disgust, or it was disappointment, or it was hopelessness, or it was anger, right? And that's how we make decisions. That's how you decided where you're living right now. That's how I decided where I'm living right now. That's how we decide who we're in relationships with, who we hang out with, what we eat, right? So I think it's really easy to fall into this idea that, you can sort of argue your way into having a conversation with someone and finding common ground. But to me, always going and trying to understand someone's emotions and their emotional drive, really, for what they believe and for what they do, I think really actually is a more valuable conversation. It's also more of a disarming conversation, because then also I can talk about how I feel, right? Yeah. So if you are talking to someone who says, undocumented people are going to take my job, what, maybe I can also, say, well, can I tell you how that makes me feel? That makes me feel bad. That makes me feel really sad, because, the person that you voted for, is hurting the people that I love, or is hurting me, right? And I think, especially with loved ones, but I think with anyone, just being able to connect on a human level, which, again, I'm not saying you have to do that with someone who's not respecting of your humanity. But if there is that level of respect and connection, or that baseline respect, having a conversation, realizing that people are emotional and people have, reasons for the way that they think and they believe. And I think that's really hard to be in that headspace if you're in your ego, right? Which is everything in American politics. Don't get me started, right? Like, are you Republican or are you Democrat? You can't, and it's like there's only 2 boxes, and you can't be like, well, and again, I'm giving a bad example, like, I'm for gay marriage, and I'm for, all these things, but then, like, I don't know about these taxes. Like, I don't know. I'm not like saying socially liberal and fiscally conservative makes sense as a position, but there are just like shades of gray, and there are positions that I agree with progressives on, and then on certain other issues, I'm like, I don't know, like, and I think that's normal, but we don't let people really be full human beings in that way, and it's become very tribalistic and one-sided. And I think that's, I'm from Canada, where it's not a two-party system. I mean, it still is like, not perfect, but I think just by virtue of having more than two parties, you just have a little bit more nuance in the way that people, identify. And then it's not this like me versus you, and I have to convince you. And, no one wants to come into a conversation when someone's trying to tell them why they're wrong, So yeah, that would be my best advice, but only if it feels good to you. Don't, do it at your own cost. Yeah, that's a really important question. And it's something I think a lot about as a journalist. And, I sometimes wonder how I've contributed to these echo chambers and to highlighting stories or paying more attention to stories that I don't know, might not be actually relevant to most people or the most important to most people, like truly making a difference in their lives. Because media and journalism, oh my God. I mean, I don't know about what's going on in Australia, but it's not good, business wise. And, almost all of my friends have been laid off. I mean, it's really, unfortunate. And that's why earlier when you said, that Facebook is in Australia, not letting, people read articles off of Facebook, because they should be, these media companies are creating content. Like I said, that should have happened 5 years ago, because I do think media really lost out in those early days where, I was part of that generation of reporters that was in the Facebook video era, where we were told, here are all these eyeballs and you're going to be able to make money. And we're not just going to take your content and then make money off of it. And obviously, it's a very different thing has happened. And so, video journalism is really hard. There's not a lot of resources for it. And if you want to talk, I mean, I am very frank with the fact that, disability issues is something that I care deeply about. And it is often an uphill battle to just get that pitch accepted, because people want to sell newspapers and they want to sell, right? So if there's not a compelling story, that it's like, well, people don't really click on that kind of story, right? People don't really, and it's like, well, does it mean that it's not worth telling? And this is not to, go after editors, and, they're just doing what they're told by their boss, right? And so what we're seeing is journalists really, and I'm really, again, I'm part of that group. Like I am now running kind of my career as a production company. Basically what a lot of journalists are doing, especially in a pandemic where a lot of our projects, everything got canceled for me. And so journalists are basically, starting Substacks, right? They're starting their own newsletters. A lot of journalists like me, I've started a production company. And so instead of working for a media company that then, gets money from advertisers, and then so the media company is kind of the middleman, and then they pay me, I'm just not gonna, sort of deal with that middleman. And I'm going to try and, sort of get different kind of funding for stories that I think are important and projects that I think are important. And a lot of people could be like, well, that's bad. That means journalists are, taking money from. But, if you are in a position and I think in a crisis like we are right now with journalism, journalists don't really have a choice. And so, it's tough. And, in places like Canada, I don't know about Australia, but there is public funding, for many things, art, culture, but also journalism, and public programming is not funded enough, but there's a robust establishment and a robust movement to keep that funding possible. And you know, in the States, I remember this is like, I don't even know if this is relevant to anyone watching in Australia, but like, I remember being a little kid in Canada watching PBS, which is public programming in Canada, in America, watching like, you know, Ghost Rider and Arthur. And there would be like, sometimes my show wasn't on because there would be a telethon where they would be asking us for money to run the station. And I remember just as a young child, just being like a young child living in Canada where like, you know, yeah, healthcare doesn't, you know, people don't do fundraisers for, you know, insulin, and public funding channels don't like ask you for money because they're funded. I just remember being very confused by that. And so, yeah, I think again, it comes back to, you know, we need a structural investment in journalism. And right now, yeah, we have $1 bajillion in Fox News, and we have $1 bajillion in St. Clair, and we have money controlling media. And again, that comes back full circle to our conversation about misinformation and how that's being weaponized against people who are just in their homes, just like on their couch, just tired from working their 3 jobs, who are just like tuning into their favorite show and they're being lied to. And this is not to excuse that, but we need to take care of our own people. And when our own people are being brainwashed, and when our own people are being exploited and recruited for literal, I mean, domestic terrorism, which is what we've seen happen in the United States over the last few months, but also over the last few years. Right after Trump was elected, we saw an uptick immediately, even before he was elected. So yeah, those would be governmental priorities. You need a functioning government, which we are closer to right now. But God, I mean, we lost a year. Like, you know, schools are just starting to reopen. You know, it's just really messy. How do we do that? Yeah, I think we, first of all, I think we need to create better, right? I think it was Saketu Mehta, who's a brilliant author, who wrote, and I'm butchering it, but like, the right is really good at telling fake stories, and the left needs to become better at telling real stories, right? That storytelling, ultimately, like, storytelling is important, right? Clickbait happens because there's, you know, someone figured out a very, you know, and the formula is pretty easy. You make people feel things, right? It comes back again full circle to our conversation about, you know, people are having an emotional experience because they're emotional creatures. So clickbait is not necessarily that people are bad or people are, you know, horrible, evil, but that they are scrolling down a feed and something, you know, agitates them, scares them, angers them, and the visuals, and right, like, it's pretty simple. And so I think that, again, if we are to invest in good journalism, we need to remember that, you know, it's not just enough to, yeah, have great quotes and you know, go on a journey to write to you know, for a particular topic. It's also important for the journalism to be good and for someone to enjoy reading it or watching it. And so I do think that's important. You know, it's and you know, you could cheapen it and call it like packaging, you know, or you know, marketing, but it's just storytelling, right? Storytelling is incredibly important. And so, yeah, I would say, you know, making sure that when we tell real stories, they're just as interesting, which they are, and we sort of put in that effort. And I think on a personal level, I think remembering that, I mean, this is just a lesson in general, right? That like patience, I think, is a really important virtue that we have completely lost in the era of digital media. And yeah, I mean, I'm, again, number one poster child for wanting immediate gratification, immediate change, immediate, right? But yeah, change happens slowly. And yeah, change never happens as quickly as we want it to, but it doesn't mean that it's not working. And I have to remind myself of that all the time. You know, I had parents who were big activists like you who worked volunteer before I came around, just like, pretty much were full-time activists. And my father, whenever I do get hopeless, whenever I do want to give up, whenever I do, and this happens to me literally on a weekly basis, I'll give a talk and I'll have a comment from someone who asks me why I'm attacking men, and if I ever write about anything positive. Literally, this happened this week, and I was like, okay, that's it. I'm not talking to men anymore. I'm done. And of course, I'm joking, but yeah, my dad reminds me, just because, like, if you feel tired, if you feel exhausted, if you want to give up, it means that you need to rest, and like then you can give up. If you've rested. You can only give up once you've rested and slept and like taken a break. If you still want to give up then like fine. But don't make decisions when you're tired, hungry, or it's like past 9 p.m. Remember that the people who came before you, the biggest activists, from Rosa Parks to, I think about Toni Morrison, I think about James Baldwin, I look at the interviews, the things that they had to say and the things that they had to deal with. And they just like said what they, continued to stand in their power as much as, I'm sure that was incredibly difficult. And we're just, we're continuing that work, and it's important to, it's a long game.
Yeah. It's
a long game. That would be my, that's the worst. It's always the worst advice. This is like advice you don't want to hear, but that is true. I mean, I just really got sick of doing so much emotional labor and seeing so many women do emotional labor when it came to the work of gender equality. And I wanted to write something that would be inclusive of men, but also be like inviting to men to join this movement with us. And when I started writing the book, I knew that there were benefits in the way that I've felt benefits from, participating in racial justice movements, for example, right? In the sense of I feel like a less shittier person. There's so many, basically, like you could call it not ripple effects, but I guess like trickle down effects of just being part of any kind of sort of social justice movement for any marginalized, community. But what I found really surprising was, as I did more research and I talked to and interviewed several men, I realized that, wait a minute, I've been lied to because I have a master's degree in gender. I've been studying this for 10 years, and I didn't know that men had so much to gain, like on a purely selfish personal level, from being part of a gender revolution. And I knew that the patriarchy hurt women very deeply, and that obviously is that there are many books about that, and there's a lot of attention paid to that. There's not as much attention paid to how the patriarchy, it also kills men and is, very bad for men from a health standpoint, from a relationship standpoint, from a sex standpoint, like you name it, fatherhood, like it's every chapter in the book. And so I thought it was really important to write a book that, instead of just talking about why feminism is good for women, about why feminism, in the words of bell hooks, is good for everybody, and with a particular focus on men. And I've found mixed feelings from men like you, who are, I think, maybe humbled from reading about this, or feel grateful, or who feel excited to, be challenged and to learn more. But then I've had a lot of men who do not want to be challenged and do not want to, I think we have really screwed up definition of bravery, right, for men, and of strength for men, right? That coming back to this question of, why are you attacking masculinity? It's like, I'm not, we kind of, it's like, I'm not here to coddle you. Like, and isn't that what like masculinity is all about, right? Like this like ideal of masculinity that like you're so attached to, and that you feel so connected to, that you're attacking me instead. And isn't strength, being able to stand up to convention and stand up for people who are being beaten and who are being marginalized, or who are being, put into a corner? Isn't that bravery? And there's something so wrong about so many of the definitions in our society of words that I think we associate with masculinity. And it's just a scam. Like, I write in the book, like, patriarchy is just like a pyramid scheme. Like, it's just like a legal pyramid scheme. Like, that's like the best way I could put it. And, particularly men who are marginalized, through sexual identity, through race, through class, religion, will or ability, will be able to understand that much. Like, it's actually easier for me to have conversations about masculinity with Black men, with gay men. It's like, they're like, how much time do you have, right? Like, it's incredibly, I'm sorry, I have 3 minutes. I'm gonna sum up, but yeah, it's actually really hard to have conversations about masculinity with straight, cis, white, cisgender, able-bodied men, not because they're bad, not because they're evil, but like, I think some of them have just never really had the experience of oppression. And instead of being grateful for that and being like, wow, lucky me, let me learn, they're like, wait a minute, I don't want this, right? It's too much. And so again, I invite us to think about strength and to think about bravery as being comfortable with, or as, bravery over comfort, which is what Brene Brown says, right? That, it might be comfortable to just like be in your little world and not question anything. But I've never met a person who's been like, I really regret learning more about, this marginalized identity, or I really regret reading this book from someone who is, has a different identity or experience than me. Usually it really always just makes you a better person, and a better human in the world. And so, I encourage everyone, even if you feel uncomfortable, especially if you feel uncomfortable, to buy the book, or just, talk about masculinity. See what happens. Report back.